Hello, Thumbprint Creations. Can you hear me okay? That's great. I'm using this microphone here, and this is my first live ever, so not sure how it's all going to work out today. Hello, Inga Howard and Penny Blaze. Good to see you all. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, in case you didn't know where I'm at. And I'm right here in my little dining area because it's close to the wireless router. So I thought that would be best. Hello from Bucharest. Wow, Bucharest. I'm glad everybody can hear me okay. I always worry about that. I could raise it a little bit for sure. One moment, I'll go do that and I'll come right back. Thanks for the tip, Laura. Hi, Laura, by the way. There we go. We'll try that. I'm on a little bit of a delay here. Yeah, that's better. Here I am. Kathy, Cheryl. Oh, hi, Cheryl. You see a lot of my regular viewers. It's good to see you all. Anyway, well, I'm going to get started with the idea that I had to talk about today, which was some of my fastest favorite quilts. Um, there are so many fast ways to make a quilt, and a lot of us quilters are in crunch time right now because of the holidays. Um, but if you're like me and you donate a lot of quilts, you really do need ideas for fast quilts that look great. So the first one I'm going to talk about is my one cut star quilt. And I've got a little sample here for you. So I'm going to hold this up. So what I've done here is I've taken a light and a dark, and I've made one cut. And that one cut is diagonally cutting off one corner. And there's no special angle involved. It's just whatever angle you want it to be. It can be longer on one side and shorter on the other side, kind of wonky. It can be straight. You can measure it. But if you have taken your two squares and made this cut, then you can swap the dark and the light, or they don't have to be dark and light, just as long as you've got some contrast. You're looking for contrast. Here is the other square. So when you put these squares together, this little triangle forms a star. And it can be a really attractive quilt. And I'm definitely going to have links to all of these type of quilts that I'm talking about today as my favorites in the description. This one I've made with layer cakes, and I've made it with 5-inch squares. But if you cut your yardage to any size square, this will work. It's just a matter of making that cut and sewing everything back together. It can be light and dark, it can be scrappy. Just make sure you get some contrast. That's the main thing. So that is the one cut star. And I'm going to be watching for questions, but I'm going to go through all these first and then we'll get to questions. So building on that one cut star, I've brought another one that I like to do too. I prefer to do this one with a layer cake, but what I've got to show you today is a charm pack, which is a 5-inch square. And this is a 2-cut star. So kind of the same idea, but we're making a cut on one corner. We're cutting off one corner, and then we're cutting off the opposite corner. And the angles of the cut can be different. They can be the same. Um, they can be just whatever you feel like. And when you put these back together, mixed up, mix up all the colors, put them back together. And when you put four of these together into a block, you're going to have two different stars. If this is different from this, you'll have a little tiny star over here, or I would, with what I've got here, I'd have a little tiny star with this purple shape, and then I'd have a bigger star forming with this yellow shape. So just by moving these blocks around, putting four together and making one bigger block, you'll end up with a beautiful star block when you put them together into a quilt. So that's that one. So those are my 1 and 2 cut stars. Now, one of my recent favorites, I just made this on the fly the first time in, I think it was in August. I made this quilt with 5-inch scraps. I had gone through all my scraps, and anything big enough I had cut into 5-inch squares. So all I did was take one 5-inch square of one shade, and the very first one I ever did, it was greens in the middle, and I left that alone, didn't cut it up anymore. Then I took two contrasting 5-inch squares and cut each of them in half diagonally. And in my case of the first one that I made in August, it was green for the middle of the block and blue scraps for the outside. Next, I sewed the 4 triangles together onto my 5-inch square like this, the long edge of the triangle onto one side of the 5-inch square. And by sewing those 4 triangles all the way around, I got a nice block, and I trimmed it down to make it nice and square. But you can see these little sides are long enough where you don't have to worry about a seam allowance. They're going to overlap. There's not going to be any matching. These blocks are so easy, and they go together beautifully. In the description, I do have a couple of links to fat quarter quilts too that are fast favorites for me. I actually have those quilts in hand. This is one that's a pretty easy, like a 2-hour fat quarter quilt. And I just basically cut fat quarters in half and stitched one side with a jelly roll strip. Super easy. That's a little 2-hour idea. This one's a little bit longer, a little more complicated. It's about a 4-hour quilt, but it's also a fat quarter idea. And it involves cutting one fat quarter into 4 equal rectangles and then adding a dark contrast color on 2 sides to square it up. And once your squares are put together, you put your squares together in opposite directions with that dark fabric on one side or the other side, just flipping your block. Goes together super fast and makes a really striking quilt in just a little bit of time. Quilt top, I should say. So I'm going to pop into the chat now and see what kind of questions we have here. Let me take a look. Okay. Okay, well, does anybody have any questions? And thanks. Happy holidays to you too, Cheryl. It looks like we have quite a few people online. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I'm trying to think of what other. So I was looking at the one cut stars. The example I showed you here was just a dark and a light. Here it is. But recently in September, I made this with a bright batik charm pack. I think I used 3 or 4 charm packs to make an entire quilt just doing this. And it was just amazing how beautiful the quilt looked. So, and again, I'll leave links to all that. So, Knights Cudelia asks, notes that I made a beautiful coat for my son, and she wanted to know if I had some tips about that. That was a long process. That took me about 2 years to get it done. And I kept stalling on that because I had purchased a pattern, an official clothing pattern, and I just kept drawing back and drawing back from it. I was putting this fabric together, these little tiny hourglass blocks. I made about 800 little hourglass blocks to make that coat. It's something that my son asked for, and when your son asks you for something, you usually try to make it, especially if it's a quilted item. Um, what I finally ended up doing for that coat, I got one of his flannel shirts and I used that. I laid it down on my table and drew out the sleeve pattern. I drew out the size of the back and the front. Um, and that was the easiest way I found to make that quilted coat, just using an existing shirt as a pattern. Then for the collar, I didn't inset the collar like you would on clothing. If I had a jacket here, I could show you. But I made a collar shape, finished all the way around, turned it so it was all enclosed, no raw edges, and I attached that to the inside of the coat and then flipped it over and pressed it real good so it would lay back as a collar. So I just kind of made that one up as I went along, but the video series on it is out there. There's a playlist for quilted coat, and it's got his quilted coat in it. It's got the one I recently made for myself, little jacket, which is awfully cute. It's in pinks, and you may recognize it if you've seen the Overwhelmed to Wow Charm Square Charm Squares video. Oh, Turquise Edwards asks about my new sewing machine. So I had a Singer Modern Quilter that I got, probably 2018. And it was an okay sewing machine. It did a good job. I didn't get the results I wanted, and there wasn't as much decorative stitching to be done. So this year I was at the Kansas City Regional Quilt Festival, and they had floor models of sewing machines that they were using in their classes and demonstrations. So I purchased a floor model. It's a Janome, I think it's a 9480 maybe. It's a very nice machine. And it came with, they threw in something called an automatic stitch regulator. And that is for free motion quilting. It's wonderful. I do like to free motion quilt sometimes. And yeah, it's a nice machine. Inga says she's making the quilt that I made the other day, fast and easy. Thanks for all your ideas. You're welcome, Inga. Um, I make a lot of fast and easy quilts just because I don't like to take the time. I I'm guess I'm not I don't like following patterns very much. I've only really made two quilts so far since I started quilting in 2017. I've only made two quilts from a pattern or a kit. And I learned a lot doing it, but it's not my favorite way to quilt. I just like to sew. I like to chain piece. I like to throw something together and figure it out on the fly, figure out how to solve a problem. So it is fun to see what you all are doing. I was going to mention, it looks like we've got plenty of people online, but just to let you know, if you're looking at YouTube on your mobile phone and you go to my channel, there's a little tab called Community. And if you have a picture of a quilt that you've made from a pattern of mine, you can actually upload it. It doesn't have to be approved or anything. I mean, YouTube has its own internal, to prevent bad things from getting posted. But if you want to upload a picture of a quilt that you've made that's based on one of my tutorials, that would be amazing. I would love to see those. So I hope that some of you will do that, but it's only available on mobile. So you have to use the app on your phone, and you just go to my page, and there's a little community tab up by videos, shorts, live, and it's off to the side called Community. So look for that and hope to see some of your quilts out there sometime. Hmm. Inga, she's a lazy quilter and wants everything nice, easy, and fast. I understand that. I know I put a post out there the other day about Karen Brown and her declutter challenge for 2026. I think this is maybe her 6th year doing it. I think it's my 4th year doing it. Um, and I am excited to get started because just things come in and they get stashed and I don't know exactly where I'm going to put them. And I find a spot, and I know in some of my videos recently I've showed where my fat quarters are living right now. They're living in a place they are not supposed to be. So I really do need to do this challenge pretty much every January. I could do it twice a year, and that would probably be better, but thank goodness for Karen keeping us all on track. Okay, Kathy wanted to know if anyone had ever asked me to put a 5-inch ruffle on a quilt. No, no one has ever asked me to do that. I donate most of my quilts, so I don't make a lot of quilts that people have commissioned, for example. Um, I think I've only done 1 or 2 quilts that somebody has asked me to make and kind of gave me the direction. Um, if someone asked me to put a 5-inch ruffle on a quilt, I mean, I guess I could, but I mean, that's just personal taste. But no, no one has ever asked me to. So, anyway, so I mentioned the community page, and we talked about my son's quilted coat. We talked about my quilted coat, and we talked about some easy ideas for quilts. Um, I'm just curious to know, what is your biggest challenge? What do you find hard? What makes it hard for you to sew? I'm just curious. For me, it's if things get a little messy, I don't want to go into my sewing space. Um, I really like to have everything put away and organized before I start to sew. Otherwise, I just get kind of overwhelmed. Um, but just wondering what everybody else's challenges are. Oh, time. Yes. Mary Johnson says it's time. Full-time job. I was lucky enough to retire in November last year. And I've been trying to limit myself on sewing. I don't want to make it another full-time job. I just want to keep it as a nice part-time activity that I have fun with. If it's not fun, I don't want to be doing it. If it's not bringing me joy, I don't want to be doing it. I only want to stay in this game until it's not fun anymore. So I figure if I throw too much into this and spend all week long, I won't have time for any of the other fun things I like to do. So I like to go bird watching. I also volunteer here in Kansas City in a couple of different arenas. And I like to ride my bike and walk and go to the YMCA. So there's plenty of things to keep me busy. So I don't want sewing to take over my life. But I probably spend 10 hours minimum a week on sewing and making these videos. So 10 to 20 hours a week probably is the average. Hmm. Yeah, Mary said it's her happy space for sure. My little room is my happy space. I've got my little Kindle and I watch. Well, right now I'm binging Project Runway, if you haven't already heard that in a video. But I think I'm up to season 15 of the original series. I can't believe I'm still watching that after all this time. Improv is awesome. Penny Blaze says, yes, absolutely. Cutting, even using the rulers. Kathy says she's a bit off on the cutting with rulers. Me too. That's all I'm going to say about that. I am never perfect on my cutting. I know that my favorite ruler, it's a 12.5-inch square Omni grip. It's the second one I've had. What happens is when I cut this way and then cut this way to square something up, that top corner where the 1 inch lines are, that top right hand corner, it gets dinged up a lot. So eventually that won't be a square corner anymore because I've dinged it up a little bit too much. So those little corners can tend to get off. And then I think, oh, do I want to replace the ruler? Oh, they're so expensive. But yeah, squaring up, squaring up things, even with a ruler, it's hard. It's hard to stay accurate for sure. So Knights Cordelia says challenge. She's a fabric hoarder. To choose a pattern is her biggest challenge. Um, choosing a pattern. So I don't use patterns a lot, but I know some people that's they need a pattern. And I do like patterns. I have a lot of patterns from, say, Missouri Star Quilt Company. I've got a lot of their patterns. I try and pick them up when they're on sale. Um, and the reason I like them is because they go with those pre-cut sizes. So it's nice to have a go back to a fallback to have something you can make from those pre-cuts without too much thought. And usually their patterns are pretty beginner friendly too. Debbie asked, what machine do I use? I just obtained a floor model of a Janome 9480 this summer. It's really nice. I'm enjoying it. I hadn't had a new machine for probably 8 years. I'd been using the same Singer, so it was time. It was time to get a nicer machine. Teresa says she's retired now and loves sewing, but her biggest problem is cutting. She likes sewing. It's my favorite thing ever. I understand. There is nothing better than the whir of the sewing machine while I chain piece. I just love that. Just the it's the physical motion of putting the fabric through the machine over and over. It's so repetitive, and the machine is just making its little noise. And maybe you have someone in the background like Project Runway. Okay. But just the motion and the sound, and almost your mind disengages from this to maybe what you're listening to or watching on TV. It's just an interesting process, and it's one I really enjoy. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Mary, for stopping by. Scrap bolt. Debbie wants to know if I'm making another scrap bolt. Um, I made one in 23, 24, and 25, and I have not yet used up all of the 2025. And at this point, I've been doing other things with my scraps since I knew I had plenty of the old scrap bolt left. I didn't want to make another bolt. But yeah, the 2024 video, for whatever reason, that one's still very popular, making that scrap bolt. But yeah, you can search my videos for bolt and you should find all three of them. But the 2025 one was my personal favorite. It didn't seem to be a real popular video, but I like that one especially because at a garage sale, I got a bunch of scrap fabric bags for, oh gosh, $5 or something. And in one of them, they had probably maybe 8 inch wide cuts with the fabric. And it was the selvage edge. And the selvage edges on those fabrics were not what you think of. They were actually fabric. They weren't that thick stuff that you don't want to use. So I cut off all those selvage edges with the prints and a little piece of the actual fabric. They were in blues and beiges and browns. And I put that just straight across my scrap bolt. And that is how my scrap bolt ended up being that exact width, because of those selvage edges. But I spaced them out and I just think it looks really cool. Penny Blades, you are smart not to buy pre-cuts. Pre-cuts are so expensive. Um, I'm going to pull up my little spreadsheet here. So I should do a video on this sometime. Let me know if you think that would be interesting. But I have a Google Sheet. So it's like Excel spreadsheets, but it's Google Docs. It's Google Sheets. And I have a cost of fabric yardage. and I have a cost of fabric pre-cut that tells me how much the fabric cost per square yard, which would be exactly 36 inches by 36 inches would be 1 square yard. So we break down how many inches, square inches, times that times however many in a yard, and figure out how many square yards. So a layer cake should be 10 by 10 inches, which, as we all know, it might be 10 by 10 inches and it might not be. Um, a layer cake has 42 pieces normally, and they measure 10 by 10 inches. That is 4,200 square inches, which converts to 3.24 yards, square yards of fabric. So if you put it all together with no seam allowances, of course, it would be 3.24 yards. So if you buy a layer cake for $40, divide that by 3.24 to figure out your cost per square yard, and you'll find that it's very high. So if I can get a layer cake on sale for less than $20, that gets the cost down to around $6 or less per square yard. That's a little more reasonable, especially if I know what I'm going to be doing with the layer cake. But cutting them yourself is always the best way to go. I was trying to think. I have charm packs in there too. Which ones are the worst? Charm packs are pretty bad. So if you buy a charm pack for, let me plug in a number here. Say I spent $10 on a charm pack. A charm pack is equivalent to 0.81 square yards of fabric. So if you spent $10 on a charm pack, you're paying $12 for a square yard of fabric. But charm packs are awfully cute, and I sure do buy them when I can get them on sale. Okay, let me look at the questions again here. Thanks, Laura. I'm glad I've inspired you to pick up those crochet needles. Crocheting is so much fun. I think they're crochet hooks and knitting needles, perhaps. My daughter-in-law loves to knit, and I've been inspired by her. So I actually picked up a knitting needle thing. I'm not sure what you call it. It's got two knitting needles, and then between them, there's this loopy loop of cord or nylon string. It's like thick fishing wire or something. Anyway, it kind of loops. So you knit and it goes onto this string, and then you just keep adding to it. But have I done anything with it yet? No. Anyway, yes, and also Penny Blaze, the video I put out on Sunday, just 2 days ago, I featured cutting myself 128 background 5-inch squares from yardage, much more cost effective. Debbie has finished a Christmas present. That's great, Debbie. You are ahead of me. I have a quilt top finished for a Christmas present, and I need to quilt it. I need to just sit down and quilt it. It won't take me very long to get it quilted, but yes, so many things to do, so little time. I'm not sure what a Via Rosa pattern is. I'm I'm assuming that's some kind of quilting pattern with a rose or a floral motif. That sounds very pretty. Yeah, the daily deals. Kathy's talking about those daily deals from Missouri Star Quilt Company are much less. But I always, even on those tempting deals, I always plug them into my little Google sheet to see, is it really a deal? Isn't it a deal? I have had some pretty good deals on yardage there too. For example, um, last year I got 10 yards. Well, I didn't get it. Some of my friends did. I already had plenty of yardage, but they put a 108 width bolt of 10 yards on sale. I think it was just Kona white, or it might have been Kona snow, or both. I can't remember, but it was $90. So you got 10 yards, but it was 10 yards of a 108 width. So that's a lot of fabric. And that ended up being the actual cost per square yard of that sale was $3. So you can get a really nice deal if you watch the sales and if it's something that you want to use and you know you're going to use it. I certainly wouldn't buy it just to have it. I don't have enough room. I'm in a closet space, a reworked closet space, so I don't have a lot of room. I have to be very cognizant. I did use up on Sunday, that Sunday video. I used up all the rest of that 108 Kona white that I had, and I still have a 10-yard bolt of Kona white that I had not opened yet. So I'm probably going to take that and cut some of it down into 5-inch squares. Cheryl says she was gifted a lot of fabric. None of us can sew fast enough. None of us can sew fast enough. We will never be able to sew fast enough to keep up with what's in our stash. Thank you, Debbie, for explaining about Via Rosa. She says that is a pattern company and they are postcard sized patterns for $2. Easy to make and inspiring. That's very awesome. Jana says hello. Alice says she also loves the Via Rosa patterns. They are fast. I might have to check that out. That's awesome. Well, we've been here a little over 30 minutes now. If anybody has any more questions, I'd go ahead and put them in there quickly, and we'll be logging off here pretty soon. Um, Tony says she's been watching me for a while. She's made a couple of bags from scraps with the plastic tablecloths. That is a great idea. I love that. I'll have a video coming up in the next, oh gosh, maybe week or two. I used 10 charm packs to make 10 gifts with that exact same idea, the plastic tablecloth or vinyl with the flannel back. They make such a great liner for a tote bag. They're awesome. So while I'm giving it a minute to see if anybody else has any more questions, I will go grab my quilted jacket that I made for myself out of the closet. I've worn it a little bit. It's getting a little too cold to wear it right now, but I made that using my husband's shirt as a base. And if you've recently seen the Overwhelmed to Wow video for the first time, you're going to recognize the fabric. I'll be right back. Well, I'm back now, and here it is. I'm going to turn it around to the back. So I used my husband's old dress shirt as a base for this quilt sandwich. And I had some fabric to use for the lining. I put a pocket on the inside. But using that, there is a video out there for this quilted coat. It's in the Quilted Coats playlist. So if you're interested in trying that out, check out that playlist. Mary says this is definitely new. Penny says it looks so comfy and beautiful and you made yourself a hug. Exactly. It's totally a hug from myself. I love it. And also I love that quilt, the Overwhelmed to Wow video with the 5-inch scrappy squares with the strips going down. That quilt measured, I think it was 90 by 100 inches. It was just huge, just humongous, way too big. I could not quilt that myself. I mean, I could, but I don't want to. So I cut it in half and used half of it to make this much better use. And then there's still enough left for a quilt for a kiddo. So that's great. Did I use wool batting? Mary wants to know. No, I think this one just has cotton. 80/20. This one I used 80/20 blend, so it's 80 cotton, 20 poly. A lot of my charity quilts I use 100% poly. Um, but I always pre-wash my charity quilts before I donate them, just to make sure there are no problems. Now I get a lot of fabric from Missouri Star on sale, as we discussed. Um, and that fabric, I've never had a problem with that quality fabric bleeding. I did get some fabric once at an estate sale that was green and red Christmas fabrics. I could tell it was thinner and not as good quality. It was, yeah, just thinner, a looser weave. And some of that green did bleed into a table runner. So I ended up keeping that table runner for myself. I didn't give it away, but I thought it was cute, so I kept it, and I don't mind the little bit of bleeding. But I always make sure, like I said, before I donate a quilt, I do pre-wash it once I've finished it. Let's see what else is going on. Thanks, Kathy. Um, Hi, Prairie Lady. Thanks. It says Prairie Lady KS. So is that from Kansas? Because I'm in Missouri, so we might be pretty close. There are a lot of quilters in Missouri and Kansas for sure. Teresa wants to know if I've ever used wool fabric as batting. No, but I have heard success stories of people using an old army blanket for the batting inside a quilt. And I've seen quilts that actually have that, and they're great. They're fine. They're just a little heavier than you would expect. So you'd want to be in a colder climate. You wouldn't be a great quilt for Florida. Um, you might want no batting in Florida, maybe just a front and a back. But um, yeah, wool. I've also used wool fabric for backing before, and that makes a nice quilt too. But for the batting itself, no, I usually use either the 80/20 cotton poly or 100% poly batting. Mary says when she was building her daughter's pattern quilt, she washed her first big quilt before getting it to her, and she had to make her another one because she didn't like the pre-washed look. That's funny. And that's a good reason to pre-wash them before donating for me, because I don't know who's going to end up with those quilts. I don't know, if they understand what quilts are or what they look like. So I think it's best to have the quilt look like what it's going to look like, so that when they wash it, they don't think they ruined it. That's what I always worry about. If I send them a nice, starchy, crispy quilt that's been quilted and not washed and dried, the first time they wash it and dry it, it's going to shrink up a little bit. It'll get the little crinkles in it, which we all love, and they'll think they ruined it. So I don't want anybody out there to think they messed up their quilts just because they washed and dried it. Color catchers. Yeah, a lot of people I know use the color catchers. Um, those seem to work pretty good. Well, folks, I think we're going to be about done now. If there aren't any more questions coming through, um, what day is it here? It's the 9th. We got about 2, 3 more weeks before Christmas. So I hope whatever holiday you celebrate, you have a nice time with family or friends and enjoy your sewing space. Kathy says color catchers for the win. Absolutely. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Mary. All right, folks, it's been good talking to you, and maybe we'll do this again next month. Thanks for joining me. Bye bye now.